This year what we did was we went and closed every riser to the fields, and we can open the pipes at the reservoir and we can pump water back. That's really helpful during the summer, most summers. Like I said, this was a very odd year. We got so much rain that we didn't have to keep recharging the reservoir because it was getting so low. But if we were to get a 2-inch rain or something in the middle of the summer, and we would be able to catch all the water off these fields. It drains into here, and then we can pump it back in the reservoir, or leave it in this in-ground reservoir, tailwater ditch, whichever you want to call it, and use it for later. So
you got a big pipe going to your reservoir, so you move a lot of water. Or
it's
it's really expensive.
It's 18-inch.
Wow. Okay.
And then when it goes under the highway back to the pump and to the reservoir, it's 24-inch.
24. We go to 24 and then.
And I wish it was 24 the whole way down.
Right.
But what happened, there was already a culvert under the highway when we closed the canal in. When they got to that point with 24, they had to shrink down to 18 to get under the highway without having to bore under and put a new pipe in.
Lots more expense at that point.
So how much water can you move?
The main pump is a 200 horse electric, and it'll pump 6,000 gallons a minute. And with that was great. When we first put all that in, we thought, man, we've got all this water. It's going to be so much easier than that old canal. Well, that created another problem. At the first of the year, when we may start irrigating rice, we may only be irrigating maybe 1 or 2 fields at a time. Well, you can't push 6,000 gallons out of 2 risers.
Yeah.
So we had to choke a lot of things down. At that point, we were still using a diesel motor. You were running it like 1,200 RPM. It was not a good deal. And then y'all know as well as I do, electric motor, when it comes on, it's on. Well, we finally, in the last couple of years, have got into variable frequency drives on our electric motors where you can slow them down, speed them up. And that made a huge difference, because there's really not a lot of times that we're running it. Sometimes we're running it completely wide open. Hot summer, yeah, like I said, that thing, when it starts, it don't shut off, because we're just rotating rice, corn, beans, just making a loop around. But the variable frequency drive made a big difference, because like I said, there's a lot of times I may only run that pump 30%, not 100%, and that saves a lot of costs there, electrical costs, energy costs.
It's also increased efficiencies. We can monitor that from our phones, so it can be sped up, slowed down, shut off.
Yeah, that was with the diesel. When we were trying to get things set, either one guy's wearing a Ranger Gator out, running back and forth to the pump, speeding up, slowing down. So now we're trying to set something, and the guy says, I need some more water. I can type on my phone, say speed the pump up to 1,500 RPM, and it'll speed itself up, start, stop it, give us warnings if you shut off. Pretty slick.
So the idea that the moisture sensors that you mentioned, would they be used in conjunction with that? You could just be reading
like I said, my main goal out of moisture sensors is to help me manage what needs water when. Because we've got, I think, like 16 different fields in this block. So if I can only water 5 at a time, I've got to, and you're taking, it may take 5-6 days to water a rice field up. So I've got to plan and know, hey, all right, it's going to take me a week to water the rice fields up. The beans are getting close. Maybe, it might take me 2 days to water the beans. I'm going to jump across the beans real quick. The rice still got enough water on it. We can hold that.
We're going to get on and off the beans, the rices, and we'll use multiple inlets in the rice and go in several spots rather than all in one place in some of the fields. It just depends. This area, this drainage, and then the drainage from the field right behind the shop and the next field, those were 2 areas of drainage that in the early 90s we were losing that water. It was all going south. That water was theoretically winding its way back to our reservoir, but there was a pump in between us and that, that. So we wanted to keep all the water that was ours, so to speak. So as part of the irrigation district project, we got the money to build this, for this drainage. We were able to hook it back in. We also put the pipeline in at that time. This, when we zero graded that, we made that ditch flow back to the north. So right now, very, very, very little, if any, water leaves our farm.
Yeah, the field's on the other side. We have a structure in the northeast corner. There's a ditch on that side of the farm. that section drains into, and we have a structure there that we put boards in during the year, so anything that we do lose gravitates back to a reservoir. So we try not to lose any water off this farm, because like I said, before we built our second, or added to our second reservoir, we were trying to grow maybe a little bit too much rice, and we were running out of water sometimes this time of year. So we were having to make decisions on, we had to finish, we're already that far in the rice crop, we were going to finish it out, so our beans were suffering. I think one thing that made a big difference for us is starting to grow corn out here. Adding a couple hundred, maybe 300 acres of corn took some of that pressure off, and we're not using near as much water now as we used to. And then the addition of that other 40 acres of reservoirs really made a big difference. And we've also added a pump there. Did a pump around 2,500, 3,000 gallons. So if I opened everything in one time, I can get almost 9,000 gallons a minute.
But on your rice, you got 0 grade, so you flood irrigate.
We've got one 0 grade, okay, and the rest is precision leveled.
But flood it on your beans and your corn. Do you flood it, or do you water it?
Everything's row irrigated.
Row irrigated.
Yeah. And like she said, the multiple inlet thing on rice, that's a big deal too, where we lay polytubing over the levees and down one side of the field. So, you know, old school ways, pump water in the top, it runs all the way through the field. Might take 7-8 days to get all the way to the bottom. This way you're pumping in each levee. Go ahead and set your rods. Water's not cascading through each levee. In theory, it should water all up at the same time, and we've saved 3 or 4 days pumping doing that way versus, you know, trying to water from the top all the way to the bottom.
There are also some nutrient or nitrogen efficiency improvements with that. If you're thinking about, you've got a whole field, you put your nitrogen out on that whole field, but water's not hitting the bottom of that field for another 6 or 7 days, versus getting water on all of the field at the same time quickly starts to get that nitrogen and reduces some of that volatility.
Yeah, you can tell that, like, you know, the top of your field will water up first, and it'll be 2-3 days ahead of the bottom just because you got the water on and got your nitrogen incorporated.
And then of course the timely manner, that translates into the office as money saved. So there's a big difference in pumping costs, but we're saving those 3 or 4 days of pumping on every field. Big difference.
How deep is this?
It's probably about 10 feet deep.
And so was it just a narrow area and you widened it and deepened it?
Yeah, it was just a ditch, just a drainage
it's
ditch.
It's sloped now.
And now it's, I think this is I can't remember if it was a 10 or 20 foot bottom. Okay. And then I don't remember the slope, but it was just a drainage ditch.
So you didn't lose any field?
Yeah, we took
a little bit.
Yeah,
a little bit on each side.
I mean, the original ditch was, well, you can see right here.
Yeah,
that's the original ditch.
Okay.
So yeah, we took in quite a bit, and the drainage pipes, or the drop pipes that drain, I mean, they come out right here and they go all the way to the edge of that field. So they're very, very long drop pipes, very long drainage pipes.
But this was empty a couple weeks ago because I pumped it down, pumping on some beans, and from draining our rice, and then we got about 1.5 inches rain last Friday. It's filled it back up to where it's running over now. So it'll store quite a bit more water than you think it will. But I mean, some other conservation efforts, you know, she mentioned variable rate fertilizer. We've been doing that 5 or 6 years probably. I don't know that saves you money. I think that what you're getting there is I think what I've seen in the yield maps is it's evened our fields out. Before just doing a blanket application of fertilizer, we had a lot of spots that needed more and maybe needed less, and there was a lot of variation in our yields. What I've seen is we're maybe putting the same amounts out, but we're putting it in the right locations.
Right.
Like I said, I don't say now lime, that's where variable rate saves a ton of money.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these fields need some lime in places, but the whole field doesn't need a ton of lime. So variable rating and knowing your fertility needs and exactly where it needs to be, I think it's a big deal, and helped us even these fields out and make them more productive.
I think we learned a lot when we started leveling ground. When we moved dirt pans in and we had deep cuts and deep fills. It took us a long time to build the ground back up, especially on fields where we had the very deep cuts. And coming out and doing the mapping and the grid sampling like that, it's really filled in a lot of places where we knew we were deficient and we needed to build back up. I think that's made a huge difference.
Do you guys work with someone to interpret the results of the grid sampling and come up with a prescription?
We have a consultant that comes and does all the sampling, and they write prescription maps based on what they've given to us, and then basically a thumb drive, I give it to the chemical fertilizer company, and he imports it into his truck and they go with it.
Okay.
So, yeah. We haven't got into prescription planting yet, but I don't know if that's, I've been reading a lot about it and I've got the equipment to do it now, but I just don't know if that's going to benefit us as much as it does some other folks. We don't have a lot of, I think where that's really going to work is when you, at the top of your field's sandy and it turns to clay at the bottom. I can see that helping. Ours are soil type pretty uniform from top to bottom, but I can see maybe some population changes through the fields in different spots, and we've invested in a lot of precision planting equipment on our planters to be able to we have individual electric motors on all our planter rows, so I can change populations on individual rows or shut individual rows off however I want to do it. So we do, like I said, they kind of get mad at me because I always come up with something and it's usually not a cheap thing for next year. That stuff's pretty expensive, but
and Dad gets caught in the middle. Yeah. Sounds really good, yeah, but
so instead of Christmas presents, I want like GPS stuff for the farm, stuff like that. But I mean, it's all got its place, and I think we have learned a lot from yield data and planting data, and I think it's going to help us. We've got some landlords now that never really been on the farm. They're grandkids and don't really know. They're really learning on the go, and they're asking us a lot of questions about what are you doing, why are you doing this, and to
why
be able to, yeah, why aren't you, what did this do, why'd you spray this? To be able to pull that map up or something and show them, say, hey, here's exactly what we did. I've got all the records for what we did on your farm, and show them the applications, and here's your planting map, here's your harvest yield map. I think that's worth something, especially to them. And like I said, we're about getting that. We've got tons of data from yield maps that, like she said, we never really knew what to do with. But I think we're getting to the point now where we're starting to make some decisions with what we're getting, kind of fine tuning what we're doing.
And the cooperations between the companies and the farmers and landowners, I mean, it's becoming more and more, I guess, a network situation, because we need the people that Trent was talking about to come in and put the soil moisture sensors. When you start adding up, and with the farming economy like it is and the prices like they are, you have to make some really tough decisions. And if we can get those people to partner with us, one of the things we're using now, we got a rebate for what we installed last year, so that helped a lot. Now this year we're using it even more. But we really need the partnership from these companies and these reps to come in and, like I say, help from a financial standpoint and from an information standpoint.
That stuff is repeated from one program to the next.
Yes.
There's been effort to try to consolidate that a little bit.
You know, we've got, on the other farm, we had an EQIP contract to put some pipeline down. Well, you've really got to be careful because you can't double dip. You know, if you have a farm and a tract that's in one EQIP contract and you're claiming you do irrigation, water management, nutrient management, you can't use that same information on an EQIP contract for that tract. So you think, oh, I'm going to come in and I'm going to put this whole farm in this EQIP contract, but really you're just going to put in a section of pipeline here. Well, you need the guidance to say, whoa, you don't want to do that. You know, let's score this on by itself, and then you're going to have this tract over here that you can use for another EQIP contract when you decide you want to do this. And that kind of information, like what we were talking about, if you don't know it's there, you don't know it's there. It's tough, and that's the role of a good TSP, to be able to guide you through that, to say, yeah, I don't think you want to do that. Let's step back and look. And how about if we do this? Because you can't say I'm going to do this and it count for two different contracts.
How much pipe planner work have y'all been doing?
Quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In your multiple inlet as well?
The multiple inlet has kind of been just me playing around and figuring it out. But now the university's got a MIRI, so I'm going to kind of use it this winter and see if I can check myself and be sure I'm right, or see if they can come up with a better idea. I like pipe planner. Well, let me rephrase it. I like the classic pipe planner. The new version was a little difficult, and I'm still working through it.
And he has voiced his opinion over that,
yeah,
so that's a good thing.
I don't like it when stuff doesn't work. That makes me mad, and that's why I've tried 2 or 3 different programs. That we started off in the faucet program, and I liked it. It was simple. Now maybe it didn't fine tune it exactly. Pipe planner's a little better, but it needs to be user friendly, and that's what I tried to explain to them. Is if you're a farmer, you better be able to sit down and do it in about 5 minutes. You better be able to design a field in about 5 minutes, or nobody's going to do it. And there's sometimes I think they go overboard trying to design these things to make them do everything when they could simplify it a little bit.
I think between Mike Daniels and the Discovery Farms team and Chris Henry, we've got several different projects going on, and we finally convinced Chris that this is Arkansas, not the Midwest, maybe. But I think he pulls his hair out over us as much as we pull our hair out over him. But it's a learning process.
Yeah, when we first started working with him, and he had some sensors out here, and he'd call me and say, "You need the water." I was like, "I know I need to, but I don't have the water." He just didn't understand why I couldn't just stop water. I said, that's real world.
Yeah. And that's why we're so inviting to have these tests out here, because what they do on 2-acre plots at any of the experiment stations has got to be transferable to 80-acre fields, and so many times it may or may not be.
And not only 80-acre fields, but 80-acre fields in the context of the 3,000-acre farm.
Right. Exactly.
80-acre fields that babysat every day.
Exactly.
Is quite different than.
Right.
Well, and you see in the landlords Trent was talking about, you read in Delta Farm Press where somebody grew 128 bushel soybeans. Well, that was on a 5-acre plot. Well, why in my farm growing 128? That's the thing.
We're to get those 128.
Yeah, very expensive 128 bushel beans.
Yeah.
But yeah, people see that in the magazines, and they're thinking, oh my gosh, look at these farmers, and that's worth $9.20 a bushel right now. Oh my gosh, look at all that. Well, inputs eat into that, and we're not growing 128 bushel beans. Not on 3,000 acres anyway.
And I think that's one of the biggest things we've learned is, you can't, if your ground's only going to produce 50 bushel soybeans, you can't put inputs on to try to make it raise 80. Right. You're wasting money. You're just losing resources. So you got to know your boundaries.
Have you used any of your yield monitors, failure rate with? You talked about trying to get everything up.
Mm-hmm.
Have you made any decisions that say, this is just not working, so I'm not going to spend the money?
Yep.
You've done that as well.
Yep.
And can you describe an example of that?
Well, that's come into the variable rate fertilizer. I think we knew that we were either over fertilizing or not getting it right, because we could see in the yield maps the variations, and being able to say, okay, we're going to go to variable rate, that was a major deal there, and actually use it, not just kind of hem-haw around with it, to actually use it and use it right. And I guess we've been doing it. Well, we've started our second set. We started out with 5-acre grids, and now we're down, 3 years later, we're down to doing 2.5-acre grids.
And I think we've made the rotation through every field.
We've been about through everything now. So I think seeing that and watching those first couple years, like I said, we thought we were going to see a lot of cost savings in fertilizer applications, and we didn't. And that kind of threw us off, I guess, at first. But then once we saw the yield maps and noticed the smoothing, I guess, and then we thought, well, we might be onto something here. It might be more than just cost savings. If we're producing more uniform all the way across the field, we're making the money back. So.
And this year with we put a lot of poultry litter out this year, and that was another thing that we put it out more where we actually needed it. Lime, another big example. We couldn't afford to. I don't know, some of the tests called for, I don't remember the number now, but we couldn't afford it this year. So let's pick and choose, and can we spread this out and put it where it needs to go? So that's made a big difference on things like that.
Y'all talked about a lot of really good things, but I hadn't heard anything about cover crops. What do you think about cover crops?
That's my wintertime project this year.
Good.
I have researched it a lot and been to a lot of meetings and sat in and listened, and I think it's got it. The one thing I'm trying to figure out, which we were mentioning earlier, is how's it going to work in a rice rotation. All these guys that are doing it, they're mainly bean corn, and they're leaving it out there 3 or 4 years in a row. Well, we're in a 3-year rotation with rice, and how's that going to work with rice? Because once we're finished harvesting the field, we've got to get rid of the straw somehow. So that's going to require either burning, disking, something, and that's going to destroy your cover crop. So I'd like to try some. I think it would benefit this farm. As she said, it's real clay based, and the soil is real compacted. And we bought a ripper last year and started ripping in front of our corn ground just to tell you how hard it is. Last fall, of course, it was a really dry fall. We didn't got everything out, not much rain, so we started ripping behind the combine, and on where we'll go by the reservoir, the ground was so hard and so compacted, the ripper wouldn't even go in the ground. It just slid on. It would go in about that far and just slide. So I think plant some cover crops in certain locations that maybe is not the best rice ground out here, or that we don't rotate as rice as much, could definitely benefit.
As part of our MRBI contract, when we added onto this new reservoir, we had one field that went into a cover crop that was a wheat cover crop. That we use for that. So not as in depth as radishes or whatever.
Not the rye,
right?
Austrian winter oats or whatever, the peas and all that stuff. We hadn't got into that yet, but it's coming.
But we're learning.
Yeah.
I think we'll be happy with it when we get into it.
What about residue management in rice?
Most of it, some of it we burn, some of it, a lot of it out here that we flood for ducks, we don't. We roll it down, flood it, and then we'll work it in, incorporate it in the spring. Like I said, some of it we burn. Sometimes every now and then we plant wheat behind rice, so we try to get rid of the residue so we'll be able to plant the wheat crop. But most of it we roll down or do something to right after we harvest.
Use the Kelly in it?
We have the Kelly. I don't know if y'all are familiar with the Kelly tools, like a big diamond harrow. That's what that worked really well.
That a lot.
Used to just use the old roller, and I like if it's dry, the Kelly tool, you can get over some ground fast, and it works really well laying the straw down. And then, like I said, what we're going to duck hunt or rent out to duck hunters, we'll flood it up during the winter.
And do you not burn all of it because you feel like you have enough control otherwise, or does it depend on what's going into it?
Mainly depends on what it's going to go into right now. Yeah, that's how we're managing it. We tried, and it worked out good this year. A lot of our bean ground from last year, since it was dry fall, we didn't rut anything up. We didn't do anything to it. We just came back in the spring, kind of put a fertilizer out, freshened our beds back up, and planted the corn. Man, that worked really good, but that's not going to work every year. The more minimal we're not really no-till, but more minimal tillage we can do. That's what we try to do. And we've dabbled with no-till some, but get in that rice rotation in a wet fall, and just you got to work it.
So you've said you've been doing row for about 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
You do beans and then your row, or what's your optimal row
we found that following rice behind corn is our best. Yeah.
Okay.
I think you've got some residual nitrogen still left in the corn, and we've kind of backed off our urea fertility on rice after following corn, and we've ended up making better yields, and that's about the only thing I can really attribute it to, is there's still some residual in the ground. And, but yeah, that's kind of our rotation we're getting into now.
And that was another learning instance when we
Right.
put corn into the rotation.
Yeah.
You know, we had to figure out what worked.
Down on that other farm, it's a lot of pigweed pressure. This one not so much yet, but adding corn down there for different rotation of chemicals is one of the reasons we started growing corn, and that really has helped us clean up and take care of some problems. All of the beans on this farm this year are conventional. We're raising, I guess, about 500-600 acres of beans, and then we've got about half the corn out here is conventional, and we've got a market with OMP up in northeast Arkansas that they're raising non-GMO chickens. They have a market for that, and so we're tapping into that to try to gain a little premium. And
Any big problems?
not so far. We've had, let's say, 2 years worth of beans, and this is the first year we've done conventional corn, and everything so far has turned out well. Yeah, I think you've got to be a lot more. I do our own spraying. You got to be timely. You better get in there and get it early and get it done right, because you don't have a lot of options.
Do you see a cost savings?
Oh
going
yeah,
to non-GMO?
seeds about half price.
Because I know some of the farmers that do that kind of routinely have $60 to $80 less an acre
Yeah.
in their non-GMO cotton as they do their
Yep.
GMO cotton. I was wondering what you do on beans and corn.
Pretty similar to that. Yep.
But the timing is very critical, and the farmer and their consultant are just running around pulling their hair out.
Yeah.
Between,
That's,
it's very tense.
when I told Gus Lorenz I was growing conventional corn this year, he freaked out and said, "Oh man, we've got to put traps on your
Gus,
fields,
freak
and you're gonna have worms and all these issues," which could have happened. Just lucked out this year was a perfect year, and it's making really good. But I think that's one of those deals where we were growing seed beans, and that kind of fell apart. So we're always looking for something. A little something to give you a little bump, a little premium's always going to help. So.
And our limiting factor on that right now, along with timeliness, but is storage.
Yeah.
Our on-farm storage limits. We can flip bins, but it's really hard on labor, and timeliness to get it in and out and to flip those bins. But that's the only reason we can do what he's talking about, is because we have that.
When it comes to corn in the rotation, what kind of nitrogen rates are you putting on for your corn?
We put about 50 pounds up front, and then we side dress 40 gallons of 32%. And then the tissue samples, that's another one of the conservation deals. Now that we're starting to take them, we can start making management decisions on, hey, do we need a tassel shot or do we not? And we've been using, instead of putting urea out, at a tassel shot if we need it, we've been running liquid fertilizer with our fungicide, and that seems to be working real well. It's not as
just a foliar?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's Coron from Helena, and it's not as critical on trying to get that urea incorporated right after, and it doesn't get the plant burned like urea getting down in the leaves. It seems to be. I think it's working. I mean, it seems to be working good for us.
Are you doing that foliar in any of these monitored sites? Foliar application?
I don't know if we have anything in the cornfield this year. I don't think we do.
We just see pretty major losses after those foliar applications.
Yield losses?
Nitrogen.
Nitrogen losses.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
After a foliar application?
After foliar application of
13,
nitrogen
On corn?
on cotton.
Oh, okay.
And then a rain.
Yeah.
We see pretty major losses coming off of those fields.
So it's going into the water, not into the soil?
That'd be interesting to see.
Yeah.
I'll think about that and try that. Yeah.
But it'd be interesting to know on the source, but like if we put urea, 23%, a lot of that's going to sit on the leaf and not go in the leaf, and then that would wash off. But on colon or some of those,
Yeah, this is like a 10-0-10 material. It's not.
you use the 10-0-10?
Yeah.
Okay. I've had better luck with a 25-00 pull on
We've used it.
helping
We've used
as
it
opposed
too.
to a 10-0-10. On paper, 10-0-10 sounds like, man, that's the thing to use.
We can use some of those.
Yeah. But anyway,
So
but
he
still a lot
put
of it sits on
both,
the leaf.
on both halves. Sorry, it was just his standard application, and it came off of both of those. So this
Yeah.
year we just put it on one and not on the
Okay.
other. So we haven't. We're still looking at the data.
The 10-0-10 we use on rice. We use a 25-0 corn, and then on our boot application on our hybrid, instead of putting urea out, we've been putting a gallon of 10-0-10, a gallon of 25-00, and I think it's a pint of headset instead of putting urea out at boot. And that, I like that. That works good.
It's just something to be aware of in the data.
But, and that's, that's questions like that makes us try something different.
Exactly.
Because I guess we had a tour bus out here last year, and we were talking about all the runoff water we're catching and going back to the reservoir, and the guy asked me, he said, "You ever tested your reservoir water?" No, not really. Why? He said, "Well, you don't think you have any residue in your reservoir?" Well, there's full of lily pads, and we've never seen any crop damage, so I'm going to say no. But then it got me curious, so that's one of the things we did this year. Is we took some water samples to try to see if we have any chemical residue, any whatever fertilizer residues that are building up in that water. And it was kind of interesting. The only thing we saw, and I think Brittany and Mike brought to us and said, "What in the world is this?" And around April, there was a huge spike out of the bio that we pull water into the reservoir. And they were like, why this? Why this to own this the only time of the year that we had any difference? And I said, I'm gonna give you my theory, is everybody's putting their pre-plant or pre-flood nitrogen out on the rice right now and flooding up, and we just got a rain. And I said, I'm not saying that's it, but I can't attribute it to anything else. And the rest of the year there's not showing anything showing up in that water.
Tammy Willett, she's a pesticide person. So she's been doing some sampling on some reservoirs that we've had up
That
there.
may be who was out here.
It was Tammy. It was Tammy. In one of our monitoring sites, as Trent mentioned, the ditch that goes on the north side of the farm that drains the north half. One of the monitoring sites is right where it goes under the highway before it hits the reservoir. So it's monitoring what's coming off the north part of the farm, as opposed. Yeah, if you want to look, we can show you where it is. These are monitoring what's coming off of a field. That's monitoring what's coming off of 800 acres of ground.
But we'll just touch on Discovery Farm for a minute. These guys probably talk about it more than I can because they're out here sampling it all the time. But from what we've seen is, when they first approached us, I think everybody was kind of worried that, oh gosh, you're going to do what? You're going to measure stuff coming off your farm and the EPA is going to know about it and blah, blah, blah. Well,
that's us. We're good guinea pigs.
I don't say we're a little different. We were like, sure, let's find out if we're causing the problem. Let's see if it's us. Let's do something to fix it. But from what the data we've seen, and we've had boxes, through the rotations of different crops, there's just not much coming off. And I'm not saying every farm's like that, but I don't know if it's our scared to lose too much water and not letting water just run continuously and losing a lot, if that's helping get everything in the ground like it needs to be and not having a lot of runoff. But we're just not seeing what everybody says we're doing. It's just not, data's just not there. So that was good, and then seeing how much water we were actually losing out of the bottom of the field, that helped us kind of change the way we were managing stuff. We weren't losing a lot, but it was still losing some. So trying to figure out timing and when to shut off a pump. Don't let it run continuously until water's going out the bottom, then shut it off. Stop a little early, those kind of things helped us be better managers.
Trent was talking about stressing the beans earlier, that we had to make a conscious decision what we were going to water. And it was always, when I was growing up, the 4th of July was the benchmark. There was a certain level on the stumps in the reservoir. If you had water at a certain level on July the 4th, you knew you had enough water to finish your rice crop, which at that point was all you were really interested in. When I was really little, we didn't water beans. But now I can remember when 10, 12, 13, we were watering beans on the farm only if you had enough water for your rice. But that July 4th was the date, and the level on the reservoir had to be at a certain point. If you had water at that point to finish out rice, then you knew what beans you could water. And this is all of our conservation efforts has just changed that tremendously.
I'm not trying to track your age, but when did you start watering the beans?
It probably would have been about 1970.
But I think being able to manage them like we do now, we've gone from when we first started running this farm, we were, lucky if you got 35 bushel beans.
Lucky.
And we bumped our average up probably 20 bushels just from different management things we're doing and being able to water them right. And, so that's, like I said, that goes back to, we know we're not going to grow 80 bushel beans on this farm. It's, you get 60, you're doing really, really good. So you just kind of manage towards what you know you can make, not try to overdo it and do something that's not going to happen.